I'm going to talk about blockchains, but I'm going to go back in history and time to, I think, the 1990s when Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber came up with DTSI, Digital Timestamp Incorporated. I actually had to call Stuart or email him to check on whether that actually existed, because there's nowhere on the web that DTSI is mentioned. It's rather surety, which is the name you later changed it to, was used. And it uses Merkle trees, which some of you may have heard of. And I'm going to tell you who Ralph Merkle was in a second. He's an amazing person. And published the root node in the New York Times each week. And Stuart actually carries around with him the Sunday New York Times because it's still being published. Each user could give a hash to surety. So for example, let's say you had a patentable idea and you wanted to prove without divulging the patentable idea that you had it on February 1st, what's today? February 2nd, I think, 2026. So what you would do, so that's Ralph Merkle on the your left, and that's me with a beard in the middle, and Whit Diffie with blonde hair instead of white hair back in 1977 when we first came up with public key cryptography, or soon after. And Ralph actually did it independently. People often think only that Whit and I did. Ralph actually had the privacy half of public key cryptography on his own, independently of us, as an undergraduate and graduate student at Berkeley without any encouragement from the faculty there. And his paper was rejected by the CACM. Admittedly, it wasn't written that well, but the reviewer who recommended it be rejected, Whit told me recently, was probably somebody at NSA whose job was to squelch ideas from being published. Is that essentially right, Whit? So here's how a Merkle tree works. You have a bunch of documents, L1, L2, L3, L4, and actually it would be more like 1,024 or a million some odd of these things, and then it would be of depth 20. But just on this slide, I'm going to just show depth 2. So you hash L1 down to hash 00, you hash L2 down to hash 01, and so on. And then you hash each of those things a pair at a time until you end up with the top hash, which is the root node, which DTSI, or surety, still publishes in the New York Times. And now, if you want to prove that user 3, for example, wants to prove that he knew L3, which is a patent disclosure, at a certain point in time, what he does is he takes the top hash, which was published in the New York Times, and he then takes L3 and produces hash, he produces a hash 3 value. And he's also given so user 3 knows this value, he produces this hash. He's also given this hash, which tells him nothing about L4. He's then able to produce hash 1. He's then given hash 0 as well, which allows him to produce the top hash, which is been published in the New York Times. And so that is the basic idea behind blockchain, although it's not yet blockchain. It's almost there. Today, the root node is stored on many servers, so things work even if a few of the servers are compromised. And the hash function needs to be collision resistant. And so, in fact, on the way over, I was talking with Stuart Haber about MD5 and how that was shown to be collision prone by a researcher in China, a young woman whose paper was rejected, who actually made a mistake. She had read the paper wrong, and so it looked like she didn't produce the results she wanted to. But Ellie Beham, who some of you may know, one of Adi Shamir's students, went through her work with her at the crypto conference and found the mistake, and he corrected the mistake, which only had to do with reversing some numbers. So the hash function needs to be collision resistant, so an adversary cannot find a new document that hashes to the same value, because then you'd be able to prove that you had that document as well. And many documents hash down to the same value, because if you have for example, a megabit, and you're hashing it down to 256 bits, then you're going to have a huge number of documents that all hash to the same value. So NIST has standardized on several hash functions, with SHA-3 being published in 2015. And I'm pretty certain, let's see, Scott, you could probably confirm, that's the most recent one, I believe. Is that correct? SHA-1, which is being phased out due to security flaws, which that same woman found, I think. Is that right? Yes, she found collisions in SHA-1 a year later. And so it should not be used. So at the 2016 RSA conference, and not everybody here may know what RSA stands for. Adi Shamir's wife was at Jim Bidzos' dinner last...
The S of RSA, not the A.
What?
He's the S of RSA,
oh.
Not the A.
Oh, I made sure that Whit was paying attention. Thank you. Adi Shamir is the S of RSA, you're right. And I made a mistake there.
How much for minute?
What? Okay. So he made a 15-year prediction in 2016 that blockchain will be hyped but succeed only in limited circumstances. And so Shamir I contacted Adi this month, actually in January, and here's what he wrote back. This is an exact copy of the email. I haven't changed my mind at all about this issue. No ordinary person is currently using bitcoins to buy anything in a store or over the internet. It is used primarily as a speculative investment, which is important. I think Bitcoin's going to keep going up in value because there's a limited supply of them and there's an increasing demand. Maybe Adi's right, largely from criminal elements, but it doesn't matter. It's going to go up in value. You can make a lot of money. So he said it's used primarily as a speculative investment and also by, he put in quotes, no ordinary persons to launder money, to support terrorism, to pay spies, or to receive ransomware payments from companies and individuals whose computer systems have been hijacked. Now, Adi may be wrong about this, but this is what he told me. And so I'm just reporting, because I work more in international security, as many of you may know. And so I actually quoted Adi by name because his thing was so public. But this guy gave me permission to quote him by name, but I've decided, since I may make mistakes, although I'm going to repeat his email verbatim, I'm not going to name him, but he's a former banker who was in charge of blockchain technology 7 or 8 years ago at a major US bank. And so I asked him some questions in emails. In 2016, Adi Shamir predicted what he predicted. And here's what this former banker wrote back. I think Shamir was right. Successful real-world uses of blockchain have been pretty rare, aside from cryptocurrency. So you're in the right business. This is going to sound cynical, but my motto of why that's the case is that centralized trusted authorities arise naturally in essentially all legitimate business, and the primary business doing cryptocurrency is crime, other than you guys. Where a centralized authority probably shouldn't be trusted and the conspirators wish to remain at liberty. I then asked him what have been blockchain's successes. This is the same banker. And he wrote, I think really there is none at scale, which surprised me. I expected him to be quite a booster of this technology. And I'll let you read the entire thing, but he wrote that the total capital required to support the borrowing is the total value of goods shipped and not yet recorded as received and paid for. So he thinks there is some application for it. I then asked him, if there's a trusted party like my bank, what, if any, are blockchain's advantages? And so again, you're not dealing with the banking situation, you're dealing where people want to be anonymous. And he wrote back, in my opinion, there are no advantages, only overhead and cost. Trust facilitates efficiency. I then asked him another question. In 2018, your bank was experimenting with blockchain technology. Which of these attempts is still active and which are successful? He wrote back, and by the way, this surprised the hell out of me, as I said. I expected him to still be a booster. I've now been out of that bank for 6 years, so please, he gave the name of the bank, which I'm leaving out, because you can identify him. So please apply the prudent discount to my information here.
Desire to censor things even when he wasn't asked.
No, I'm censoring it.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Correct.
Censor things even who weren't asked.
Correct. Ongoing blockchain offerings seem to be trade finance, institutional digital asset custody, and integrated digital assets platform. So what's Bitcoin, which has been talked about a lot? Well, a guy or a woman, we don't know if he or she even exists, who calls himself Satoshi Nakamoto, wrote in a paper, we define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a one-way hash of the previous transaction, and that's the chaining, the blockchaining idea, and the public key of the next owner, adding these to the end of the coin. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. And since we're in the Arabic world, I will mention that the first digital signature standard in the United States was done by a man who came from Egypt, Tahir al-Gamal, which means Tahir the camel. He was a student of mine at Stanford, and his brother, Abbas al-Gamal, was chairman of the EE department at Stanford some years ago, about 10 years ago. So when owner N wants to transfer the coin to owner N plus 1, or some part of the coin, he may want to break the coin up, he signs a hash of owner N plus 1's public key, thereby identifying the new owner, because he uses his secret key to verify it. And how do you know that you only need his public key to verify the signature? And that's, you know that his public key is what it is, what he claims it is, because the previous owner told you that in a signed statement. So here's the diagram from the original paper. And so owner 1's public key is hashed down with the previous block, which is the block chaining, to owner 0's signature. And owner 1's private key can then be used when owner 1 creates a signature that transfers that to somebody else. One of the big problems with Bitcoin is that it takes a lot of power to do the mining. And this, some people think this was a mistake of Satoshi Nakamoto to require proof of work, because now we're using the power that goes into a small city, I think, to do Bitcoin mining. And what he wrote in his paper was the proof of work involves scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. And so you can vary the number of bits. If you want to take 1 million operations to find it, you can require 20 0 bits. If you want 1 chance in 1 billion, if you feel that that's necessary, you can make 30 0 bits, etc. And the first miner to find such a value receives a reward in Bitcoin. And that's what motivates people. So I'm going to stop about quantum computing. I'll just tell you how real is quantum computing. There's, again, a lot of hype surrounding it, but it's something we need to worry about. But I'll stop there.
Hi, my name is Thomas Sargent. I'm an economist. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanics underneath blockchain. So here goes. So I'm going to talk about an important paper. It's right hot off the press. It's being constructed. It's called a game theoretic analysis of blockchain consensus. And it identifies a difficulty in blockchain and makes a proposal on how to circumvent it imperfectly, and it identifies a key problem. So what this is this is going to use game theory, which was invented by von Neumann. What the paper does is it recognizes that under a commonly used rule inside blockchains called the longest chain rule, that there's vulnerability to these 3 kinds of attacks. It also proposes that there's a way to modify blockchains by using particular strategies. Today, it's an important possible suggestion. It identifies a characteristic of blockchains that's pervasive, and it's a Grossman-Stiglitz-like trade-off between informational efficiency and consensus. You cannot have both. So this is identifying the limitation of blockchains from all kinds of blockchains. So its implication is that in this structure, vulnerabilities are endogenous, and what they depend on equilibrium strategies. And so what's the whole proposal here is when you have an environment that's vulnerable to problems, what is that counter skill, mechanism designer? An economic engineer tries to modify the game, change some of the protocols, hopefully to get better outcomes. So that's what this paper is about. Okay, so the objects in play, it's going to be a blockchain. Well, what is a blockchain? It's a ledger. It's a communally shared ledger. It's managed without any trusted third parties. Nobody manages it. It's consensus of parties who are in the blockchain manage it. It's mathematically, it's a directed graph called an arborescence or a tree. In each possible path through the tree, there's many possible paths. That's a possible ledger. Mathematically, a ledger is going to be a path. Okay, so blockchains. So what are they? What's the problem? It's a structural endemic problem. They're decentralized ledgers. They're managed communally by selfish transaction verifiers for making the thing go. In Bitcoin, they're called miners. Then the key challenge is you have to achieve consensus among self-interested users in order to get a transaction approved. So Bitcoin uses a so-called longest chain rule. It treats, the theory is that miners are rational profit maximizing agents. And prior work shows that this fails under certain conditions. So what this paper by Zetland Jones and Carnegie Mellon team, they constructed dynamic game theory meta model. They study consensus as an equilibrium outcome. It's basically a Nash equilibrium of a dynamic game. And then they are going to propose they're actually going to change the game. That's the way I think of it. They're going to propose these things called checkpoint strategies. And they argue that these are better. So here's the environment. Well, mathematically, this is what a blockchain is. There's miners, and they consist of the mathematical theory behind Bitcoin is there's n of them, large number but finite. They're infinitely wide. They have a discount factor delta. They have a mining power pi. We'll come back to what that is. Time's discrete, 0, 1, 2, 3 forever. And miners choose the block location. Blockchains are directed graphs. And what do the miners care about? So they're going to be utility maximizers. They like their coin balances. The more Bitcoin, the better. And but they don't. Who decides their coin balances? The whole Bitcoin, the blockchain chains. Coin balances are more valuable if miners agree. If more miners agree, they're more valuable. What you finally get at the end is you get coins, consumption goods. And you like those, you like them if your consumption goods get by spending transactions. Transactions are settled with a delay, not immediately. The equilibrium concept, it's a pure public equilibrium. There's public strategies. So the assumption is everybody knows everybody else's strategies. What's the ultimate source of consensus? Balances can be spent only if miners agree. That's why people want consensus. If you get an outcome in any economic model, any mathematical model, ask why would happen. Well, why do you get that outcome? It's because people want it. People inside the model want it. Okay, so the way this goes is, like any economic model, you got to specify the objective function. You know, economic models, a bunch of constrained objectives, constrained maximization problems all put together in a coherent way, as what these guys are doing. So we have to specify miners' preferences directly over information recorded on different ledger versions. So what do miners choose? What are they choosing? Different ledger versions. The miners differ. That's the key thing. When miners differ, that's the source of the problem. That's why you need a mechanism to get agreement. So how they differ? Mining power, PI. There's just going to be a probability of miner I successfully appends a block. The PIs are exogenous. They hardwire that. They got to add up to 1 as the probabilities, and they can be highly concentrated in practice. Some miners can be a lot more influential than others. And then the next thing is pawn balances. So there's balances and there's transactions data, and balances vary across blocks and across chains. Blocks are parts of chains. Okay. So what's the difficulty? So here we go. Sorry about this. So what do miners care about? They have preferences over chains. They have preferences. So there's a set of chains, possible chains called strip B of G. Anytime I tell you what your utility is, I gotta tell you what it's composed of. It's a sum of these objects, which depend on there's a set of weights that person I puts on block B at time t, and B is the share of other miners' power in chains containing B. There's balances are more valuable when more miners agree when they work on the same chain. The payoff is the expenditures, and those are all parameters of the model. So different miners, because there's heterogeneity in their parameters of their structure and their utility functions, they prefer different chains. So if my name is I at the bottom there, I prefer chain BI star. That's the way this goes. Okay. So then the longest chain rule, which is widely used, it has a problem. It's what's the rule? Extend the chain with most blocks. That's what's supposed to be done. It fails under 3 kind of profitable choices or deviations. Deviations from the equilibrium. They're profitable for people to deviate from the equilibrium. That means it's going to break the equilibrium. There's something called a double spending attack. These are famous. There's a way to do it, and this slide tells you how to do it. It's close to pseudocode. You fork to omit the large spend transaction, and it's profitable under certain conditions that you can just check. There's consensus redirection directs. You fork to include favorable balances that aren't on the longest chain. And then there's saving on consensus attacks. You fork to delay spend inclusion, and you reduce flow disutility. With heterogeneous miners in this environment, that's what they're looking at, and that's realistic. Longest chain rule fails. So which type of people want to, their models will tell you, with this heterogeneity, it'll tell you some types will want to deviate in some ways and some will deviate in other ways. So they have a model of these malicious actors who are they're profit-mising malicious actors. I'm calling them malicious, that's my term, that are rendering the chain vulnerable.
and they tell you, their model will tell you which types these are. So what's their resolution? They're going to change the game. They're going to introduce what's called checkpoint strategies that introduce, and this is a trick that has been brought into economics by some very important economists. It's called using history-dependent strategies. People like Hurwitz and Maskin and various people have done this. So checkpoint, we're going to use history, we're going to extend the strategy space, history dependence, and it's going to be, they're going to rig the history dependence. If you kind of a Markov decision person, we're going to extend the state to make it longer and longer in a way that's going to align incentives to promote consensus. That's what these guys are after. So what it does is, the rule is to ignore forks that omit blocks behind a checkpoint. So there's a new object here, is a checkpoint. It's a reference block that's updated periodically. And miners are only going to consider chains that contain the checkpoint. And the key property is I'm bad at these slides. The key property is the block is checkpoint. Earlier transactions can be removed. Okay, so then it eliminates double spending for checkpoint block. That's what they're going to do. And then they have various propositions that they show how this works. They show that it contains some of the vulnerabilities. It prevents some of the vulnerabilities. That's what they're able to show this. So large transactions and concentrated mining power become less of a threat. So the truth is that they have a theoretical explanation why Ethereum and Polkadot actually use checkpoint-like gadgets to try to fix this vulnerability. So there's something called latency, and which is an additional difficulty. It can cause checkpoint disagreement. So when this happens, it delays settlement. So latency is a problem for their mechanism, and they have to devise this checkpoint strategies to absorb latency shocks. So again, what I'm giving you a flavor of this is what these sophisticated, you can call them economists or computer scientists, they're devising an algorithm. Their game's going to come to be an algorithm to create good outcomes, where the outcomes are endogenous. So what they identify is there's a trade-off. They do not solve this problem perfectly, and they have a characterization that it can't be solved perfectly. There's a trade-off between consensus, which is what you want, and informational efficiency. So full information checkpoint rules, they'll use all the data, they maximize welfare. But they fail to achieve consensus. So small updates can cause large chain shifts because there's forking incentives. And what you can do is you can kind of fight this by having partial information checkpoint rules. You ignore some recent information. That you can get consensus if you want, but that's not going to be the most efficient thing. So there's a fundamental trade-off which they've discovered, and it's a sophisticated version of an old problem that Grossman and Stiglitz identified in very important work in the late 70s, early 80s. Fully efficient consensus is impossible with strategic agents in this mechanism. So that's what this paper's done, and it's readable. It's all kind of finite math and a set of sophisticated. It's a set of constrained optimization problems that are setting together, and that are coherent, and the authors are mechanism designers. They're social planners, if you will, who are figuring out how to make this game better. So so that's what they do. I'm the reason I chose to talk about this paper is it's frontier, and it shows that blockchains are still a work in progress, and they're when you see that they've been taken advantage of, there's reasons that are systemic involved in the difficulties of achieving consensus. So I apologize that I'm not there. I regret that I can't help it that I can't be there in person. It's like I don't choose when I get COVID, but thank you for letting me share these thoughts about this really interesting paper.